one of the things they looked at was something called the Ganzfeld. The Ganzfeld experiment was based on dream studies. There were some dream studies done in the 1960s and early 70s at Maimonides' lab in New York City. What they were trying to find out is, are people more psychic when they're sleeping than when they're awake? And they found through doing experiments, what they would do is they'd have someone come in and they'd wire them all up with EEGs to measure their brain waves. And they'd watch their eyes as they were sleeping. And when they would sleep in the lab, and while they were sleeping, they would watch. And when they were dreaming, when they saw the rapid eye movement, they'd wake them up. And they'd say, "What were you dreaming about?" Meanwhile, in another room down the hall, there was someone who was looking at images or looking at some target and trying to project that to the person who's dreaming. Well, they found out that when they woke the person up, they would get information about the target. They seemed to be more psychic when they were dreaming. But you know, one of the things about this experiment is, first of all, you have someone sleeping and you're waking them up all night long, which isn't very pleasant for them. Secondly, you got someone down the hall who has to stay awake all night sending information, and the experimenter has to stay awake all night. And if you didn't get success on the first trial, you had to wait a whole nother day till the person was going to go to sleep again before you could do another trial. So it wasn't very convenient. So they created this method called the Ganzfeld. The Ganzfeld, what they would do is you set up a sender and a receiver, just like you did in the dream studies. The sender was the person looking at the targets, looking at a video or pictures. And the receiver was someone who was in another room, a sealed room, and they would be in a form of sensory deprivation. They would be in this quiet room that was shielded very well from the outside noise, would have metal shielding around to quiet the electrical signals as well. They would be in a very relaxed chair, have half ping pong balls on their eyes to block the light, but also have a red light shown in the room to kind of give them a complete field, a sensory field of all red. In addition, they'd have headphones on playing pink noise, similar to white noise, except it's not so staticky, more like waves. So they'd undergo a little bit of sensory deprivation. And once they were relaxed, the other person would start seeing the target, the video, and they'd start sending. The receiver would just speak stream of consciousness, whatever came to their mind. And the question was, is the information they're getting, stream of consciousness, related at all to the target? Well, we're humans. The good thing about humans is we're really good at making patterns out of things and really good at seeing relationships. We would naturally, if you only saw the one target and you saw the transcript, you would say, oh, these two things match, we can find matches. But to make it more scientific, we actually showed 4 video clips and had them decide which of these 4 seems to match. 3 of them were decoys, only 1 was the actual target. So it provided a way we could do statistics around it. You could figure by chance you would get 1 out of 4 correct, 25%, if you were just guessing. But what they found is people were actually getting closer to 34% correct. Now, this might not seem like a big number because, 34%, you're still missing over 60% of the time. You're still not getting it right. But compared to 25%, this is a big statistical jump. Imagine it's like getting 1 out of 3 correct instead of 1 out of 4 correct. That's a really big change in the statistics and in the evidence for this. So there was something about this sensory deprivation technique, something about speaking stream of consciousness, something about this process in general that was allowing people to do better at ESP tests. This is where we started getting into the process. What is it that we can do to try to help people get better at this, and what are the components of it? They did this experiment not only with people in the general public, but they also did it with people, they did an experiment with creativity to try to see if creative people were more psychic than people who aren't creative. They went to Juilliard School in New York, did these tests with the artists and musicians at Juilliard School. It's an art school in New York. And they found that instead of getting 34% accuracy, which is a good number, they actually were getting closer to 50% accuracy with creative people and the people from Juilliard. And when they only worked with musicians, they got closer to 75% accuracy. This is a big, huge difference. So there's something about the creative process and something about creativity that provides a better opportunity for people to hear what we call this quiet signal. This is why we put them in these rooms in the isolation, to quiet the mind, bring everything down a bit, because when you quiet the mind, you're able to hear this subtle signal come through more easily. What is it about creativity? Well, there's multiple things about creativity that could be involved. If you've ever studied anything about creativity, it's not one thing. There's a lot of components to it. Things like, for example, people who are extroverted actually tend to do much better on these tests. And extroverts tend to be expressive quite a bit. And so they tend to do better at these things. Another portion of creativity is what we call boundary thinness. There's a lot of people in the world who see things with black and white. They can see very quick right and wrong, black and white. And this is what we call thick boundary. People who have thin boundaries see a lot of gray areas. They're able to see things from different perspectives. They're able to take other people's perspectives really easily. You'll find in creative people, this is one of the components of creativity, is boundary thinness, being able to take other perspectives, being able to express from other perspectives. In addition, there's another characteristic that we call dissociation. Dissociation, the easiest way to explain it is, if you've ever been driving your car down the road and all of a sudden you're listening to radio, having a conversation, doing different things, and all of a sudden you're home and you're like, how did I get here? Well, this is a form of dissociation. Your attention is split in many areas, and yet you're still able to perform a task that important and detail-oriented task while your attention is on other things. Dissociation is something that musicians often try to develop naturally. For example, if you have jazz musicians, especially on the stage improvising, they have to stay in touch with everything that's going on around them, and yet they still need to be focused on their own thing. So their attention is split in different areas. They actually try to train this without purposely doing it. This is a technique they're training. So these are components of creativity that what we can do is we can test people to say, hey, are you good at dissociation? Do you have a thin or thick boundaries? We can look at these things and say, how do these contribute to ESP performance? So this is where we've moved to process-oriented research now. Instead of we look at personality characteristics. We look at environment, different things like this to see which ones help to improve people's ESP performance.